Now, Tolbi or Tulba is a private event in which only the closest relatives of the bride and the groom are present. Now, the groom formally asks for the bride's hand from her parents. This tradition takes place after both families have agreed to the marriage proposal. Both families give their blessings to the groom and the bride, and the Surah Fatiha is recited. And this is recited by everybody that's present at the event. After that, tea is served with sweets to enjoy and celebrate this whole new agreement, this marriage agreement. Number 9, we have engagement. Now, engagement is also known as khutbah in the Middle Eastern countries, and it's a ceremony in which the bride and the groom, they exchange the rings. So putting the rings on each other's right hands is a very common thing to do. Bride and groom also wear matching color clothing as well. The engagement is pretty much just like a wedding party or dinner party, which is arranged by both parties. Now, moving on to number 8, we have Radwa. Radwa is a small event which takes place 1 or 2 days before the actual wedding. In this small event, male relatives from both families, they go into the bride's home and take care of anything that needs to be done in terms of decorating and setting things up and all of that. And they also make sure that the bride's parents have a great time in this ceremony. The groom's relatives, they make sure to resolve any issue before the wedding, and the eldest man from the groom's side congratulates everyone and gives his blessings. Another cool tradition is the tradition of henna. I love these things. Henna is probably the most common wedding tradition in the Middle Eastern and Arab countries. The bride's female friends sing Arabic songs and they draw henna on the bride's hands and feet, sometimes other parts of the body as well. There's even a henna night. Henna night is just like a bachelorette party for just the females. The friends and family, they dance and sing songs about the bride's new future. They have drinks and food as well, of course. Men also have their own separate party where they, typically do things like dancing to traditional music. Khatib al-Kitab is the tradition next. This is another Middle Eastern marriage tradition. It is a wedding ceremony in which both families sign the marriage documents. The sheikh or the ma'zun lays out the conditions and the rules of the marriage, and specifically in Coptic Orthodox Christianity, as well as in the Ethiopian Tewahedo Church, brides and grooms are dressed up in royal garments, sometimes wearing capes and crowns and jewelry even. The couple are each given a candle to hold in their left hand during the ceremony, and this represents their beliefs in Jesus Christ as the light of the world, and that they will be guided through life by the teachings of the church. The couple's right hands are then joined by the priest as a symbol of unification. Now, halfway in at number 5, we have the tradition of plain rings. The bride receives a ring from the groom, and it's not necessary that the item has to be a ring though, but normally it is a ring for tradition's sake. The ring must be plain though, made of gold and without any sort of ornaments or extra fixings on it, none of that stuff. The simplicity of the ring symbolizes that the wedding is also uncomplicated and simple. The groom does not always receive a ring at this point though, but the bride has to give him a ring, and she must wait until they have left the chuppah to do so. All the events must be carried out according to the teachings of the Torah. So Jews, they try to keep that at the forefront when they're practicing and doing their wedding traditions. Number 4 leads us to a tradition known as Tinaim. Now, it's a document that has to be signed to declare the official engagement of the bride and the groom. So even if the man proposes to his woman and he puts a ring on her finger, well, doesn't mean they're engaged. They're not officially engaged at all. They have to sign the Tinaim. Now, next up, the ketubah is another contract that is signed, and the groom signs this contract to make sure that from now on, he'll be responsible to fulfill the emotional as well as the physical needs of his wife. He'll be responsible to provide food and shelter to his wife, and to make sure that the wife is fulfilling his vows. The wives do have access to this contract, and it is a necessary part of the Jewish wedding because the wedding cannot take place until it is signed. People usually handwrite and decorate these contracts. Number 2 brings us a very interesting tradition though, stepping on glass. At the end of the ceremony, the groom is invited to go and step on some glass. With his shoes on, of course. Imagine barefoot stepping on glass. Nah. So not only is this a fun way to end the wedding ceremony, but it also is extremely symbolic in Jewish weddings. It recalls the destruction of the Jerusalem temple and reminds the newlyweds and all of their guests of this event, even at their happiest hour. To end this episode off at number 1, we have the tradition of Yichud. After the ceremony, the couple is taken to a private room called Yichud for some quiet time. Yichud means alone together, and no one is allowed to disturb the couple at this point. The couple is allowed to break their fast in Yichud and have some alone time after the hectic day. Now, I do have to say though that there is a big misconception that the couple consummates their wedding, marriage through sexual intimacy in the Yichud. Well, of course, it happens, right? After all, we're talking about newlyweds here, but it's not necessarily happening during that time. The couple may choose to do it after. But in biblical times, the Yichud was when the marriage would be consummated. Starting at number 10, the tradition of no specific officiator for the wedding. So marriage traditions differ depending on the culture as well as the Islamic branch. And in Islam, there is no specific clergy who are designated to officiate weddings. So any Muslim who understands Islamic tradition really well and is a practicing Muslim can officiate a wedding. There are also many people that use marriage officers called Ma'zun, and if a Muslim wedding ceremony takes place in a mosque, you'll need to take off your shoes for sure before you enter into the mosque. So yeah, just a few things to keep in mind, but no, there's no specific clergy that is like, yes, that person and only that person can officiate a wedding. The tradition at number 9 is Mar. The marriage contract includes a Mar, which is a formal statement that specifies a certain amount of money that the groom is going to give to the bride. And the Mar actually specifies 2 components. Now, the first component is that there is a certain amount of money that's to be owed before the marriage is consummated. And then there is a second deferred amount that's given to the bride throughout her lifetime. However, nowadays though, you're going to find that many couples actually just use wedding rings as the first payment of Mar, and then the deferred amount can come in the form of a little sum of money or some sort of gift. Another interesting tradition in the religion of Islam is separating genders at a wedding. Gender separation at weddings is pretty common when it comes to Muslim tradition, and not every Muslim though will choose to separate the genders at their wedding, but more traditional ceremonies, they're actually going to keep the men separate from the women. And during the reception, you'll see men and women celebrating in different rooms, or the rooms are divided up by a partition, or even some cases, men and women just sit at different tables. Walima is the next tradition at number 7. This is the wedding feast. After the wedding contract is signed, the feast that follows is called the walima. And in some Muslim cultures, the walima can last for multiple days. One thing to keep in mind though, when you're feasting and having fun at a wedding, the consumption of alcohol is forbidden in the religion of Islam, so you typically won't find any open bars at a wedding, or you won't see any guests giving toasts with champagne in their hand at a traditional Muslim wedding. Nica comes in at number 6. So the marriage contract is signed in a Nica ceremony where the groom or a representative of the groom actually proposes to the bride in front of at least 2 witnesses. And in Islamic law, marriage, or specifically the marriage contract, is referred to as Nica. And the bride and the groom during this time repeat the word Kabul, which means I accept in Arabic, 3 times. And then the marriage contract is then signed. And if men or women are separated for the ceremony, there's going to be a male representative called a wali that acts on the bride's behalf during the Nica.
Another important fact about divorce in Islam that not many people may know is that the husband can end marriage through 3 types of oaths: the oath of continence, the denial of paternity, and conditional talaq. The first 2 types were pre-Islamic practices confirmed by the Quran, which also make clear that izhar is reprehensible despite being legally valid. Another surprising fact is that the Quran says, "And if you fear a breach between the two, appoint an arbiter from his relatives and an arbiter from her relatives. If they both desire reconciliation, Allah will effect harmony between them." Verify Allah has full knowledge knowledge and is aware of everything. That means that it is highly suggested for the couple's family to be considered when making this big decision. It seems like getting an objective viewpoint is very important when considering divorce in Islam. In the event of divorce, children often bear the most painful consequences, and Islamic law takes their needs into account and makes sure that they are cared for. The financial support of any children both during a marriage or after divorce rests solely with the father. Courts have the power to enforce child support payments if necessary. The amount is open for negotiation and should be in proportion with the husband's financial means. The Quran advises the husband and wife to consult each other in a fair manner regarding their children's future after divorce, which is quoted in Surah 2 verse 233. This verse specifically holds that infants who are still nursing may continue to breastfeed until both parents agree on the period of weaning through mutual consent and counsel. Islamic law stipulates that physical custody of the children must go to a Muslim who is in good physical and mental health and is in the best position to meet the children's needs. Before I get to the last fact, I want to mention that it is known that Prophet Muhammad once said, "Of all the lawful things, divorce is the most hated by Allah." For this reason, the first step that a couple should make is to really search their hearts, evaluate their relationship, and try to reconcile. All marriages have ups and downs, and this decision should not be arrived at easily. Nonetheless, Allah gives a divorce as an option because sometimes it is truly in the best interest of all concerned. Nobody needs to remain in a situation that causes personal distress, pain, and suffering. In such cases, it is more merciful that you each go your own separate ways, peacefully and amicably. The last fact of this episode pertaining to divorce in Islam has to do with the prevalence of divorce. In terms of divorce within the North American Muslim community, the last study conducted about this was in the early 1990s by the late New York-based sociologist Ilyas Bayounis. According to his research, the continental Muslim divorce rate stood at 31.14%, which he said was a far cry from the Muslim world's two highest divorce rates, Turkey and Egypt, with 10% each. Divorce is on the rise in the Muslim community, said Imam Muhammad Majid, Vice President of the Islamic Society of North America and Imam and Executive Director of the Dulles, Virginia-based Al Dulles Area Muslim Society Center. "We have seen an increase in divorce from people married for a while and those married for a short time," he said, adding that Muslims across the board are getting divorced in higher numbers.